Visionary goofballs. Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, that there is no such thing as death, life is only a dream, and that we are the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather. Bill Hicks. Frank was heir to the vision of Dr. Richard M. Buck, author of the 1901 book Cosmic Consciousness. He saw what Buck saw, knew what Buck knew, and like Buck, he had the intelligence, imagination, and courage to put the pieces together and envision a future in which we were all granted full and unrestricted access to our own internal dimensions. On the one hand, it sounds like the most obvious, desirable, and natural thing in the world: freedom. On the other hand, it sounds weirdly insane and dangerously radical: heresy. Frank told me that he had always planned to write Cosmic Consciousness too, but he had the opposite problem that Buck had. Where it was probably all Buck could do to cobble together a handful of anecdotal cases, Frank was awash in a sea of lucid, first-hand accounts. Some under scientific conditions, some not, but no shortage of them that were cogent and powerful and unassailable. The real issue, he explained, isn't the one-time event, but lasting transformation, the permanent upliftment of the individual. Those cases, he said, were not so lavishly scattered, but could still be found. He didn't want to write just another rehash of the little revolution that couldn't. He wanted to carry on in the spirit of Buck and approach the subject with an almost childlike gladness, with a Christmas morning excitement, as if mankind's great present from God was sitting at our feet, wrapped in shiny paper with a perfect bow, just waiting for us to rip it open, and with it, ourselves. That was his dilemma. Childlike gladness was ill-received in the halls of academia. Christmas morning excitement doesn't pay the bills. Frank had a career to think about and a family to feed. He never wrote his book, so he'll have to settle for a few inadequate pages in mine. I can't make his argument for him, but the great frustration of his life was that he couldn't either. Frank wasn't at Harvard or Millbrook with Leary, or in the Redwoods or on the bus with Kesey, or in jail with either of them, but he was there on the fringe somewhere, just starting out in his academic career, full of big ideas and a little revolutionary zeal. He was already familiar with Buck, Whitman, Thoreau, Emerson, and that bunch. He was already immersed in the mindset of an elevated humanity and convinced of its potential for upheaval. He understood and believed in what Buck called cosmic consciousness, but the problem, as he saw it, was one of access. What good was this wonderful faculty everyone supposedly possessed if no one could access it? What good is a door if you can't open it and go through? It's not about the door or the wall or the key, he told me during one of our evening chats. None of that. Those only matter on this side. The point is what's on the other side. The point is going there, being there. Then all this nonsense of doors and keys is forgotten. I agreed with him on that restating of the gateless gate paradox. The person who is free has no feeling of freedom any more than a person who is not on fire has a feeling of being not on fire. Freedom is a concept of the incarcerated mentality. It's something you think about when you're looking at windowless walls and locked doors. Once you're through and beyond, the very concepts of captivity and freedom recede out of existence behind you. So there was Frank in the late 50s and early 60s, staring at a wall he knew was a door, but a door he didn't know how to open. Maybe he'd been through it himself, but in selfless bodhisattva style, he wanted to throw it open for everyone. "Why shouldn't it be open?" he once asked me. "What the hell's the point of anything else if we don't have this?" Good question. And then, what to his wondering eyes should appear? The golden key. Very much a miracle and, to Frank's way of thinking, far more important than the discovery of fire or the invention of the wheel. As with his famous Harvard counterparts, the first keys he found out about were brass and tin, but they would soon be displaced by the true golden key. Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. Instant Buddhahood. Free and easy access for everyone. The New World. That's what Frank called this dream of his. He thought America would be at the center of it, that this was the true freedom, and that ushering in a new era of fully realized human potential was America's promise and responsibility. That, to him, was the American dream, the Emersonian ideal, not a car in every garage and a chicken in every pot. Frank's New World was about a new tomorrow, not a continued downward spiral of greed, corruption, disease, and stultifying mediocrity. In the same way that having a clear vision of humanity's potential soured him on the current state of humanity, having a clear vision of America's potential disappointed him with regard to its current state. I think this might be one of the reasons he and Isabel bought their Mexico house years ago and vacationed here and ultimately retired here. Frank was quietly disgusted with the United States of America. He had a sad sort of disillusioned air about him. From our semi-boozy discussions, I was able to form a fairly clear picture of why. Simply, he was a patriot. He loved America, but the idea of America meant something to him that the reality of America didn't approach. It wasn't the place or the people he had such feelings for, but the idea. He wasn't a nationalist. He was a humanist and an idealist. He felt that America had a destiny it had failed to fulfill. He thought we were supposed to be venturing into new frontiers, not walling them off and plastering them over. He once likened his feelings for the U.S. to a son for whom one has the highest hopes and expectations, only to watch him grow into a common street thug and drug addict, beyond redemption, all potential wasted, all hope gone. He sadly echoed Lincoln's battlefield dream that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom. But what started out of the people, by the people, and for the people, he said, is now of the corporation, by the corporation, and for the corporation. When I knew him, he still possessed a youthful dreaminess that most of us leave behind with our teens, an obstinate sort of optimism he had never outgrown. It's a good thing he liked to drink, or I might never have seen it in him. He didn't get loud or wobbly or maudlin when he drank, just nostalgic for the idealism of his youth. And even with all that, he was not particularly sentimental. He didn't pine for his stillborn revolution. He merely expressed a sadness for what he once glimpsed through a slightly open door. His dream of emancipation, of a liberated humanity. Every man, woman, and child whole and complete. He approached it like it was an academic issue for him. But there was a lot of feeling behind his words. Words like his don't get expressed without a lot of feeling behind them. In Buck's case, as in Frank's, the words were fueled by the direct experience of a reality behind this one, and the certain knowledge that this one was flat and hollow by comparison. The direct experience of cosmic consciousness is something that can generate a lot of feeling. The rest is history. The dream is dead, murdered in its cradle. But for a little while it was there, Frank told me on one of those boozy nights. We could open that door for everyone, forever. Or so it seemed. I still don't know what happened. It all got away from us so fast. Well, you know the story. You've read the books. Here it is 40 years later, and look at this ridiculous world we have. What would it look like instead if that door had been kept open? What would we be like after several generations? What would that look like? It wouldn't look like Woodstock or Haight-Ashbury. That was nothing. That was just a few crazy minutes of a history that was never written. The door has turned back into a wall now. Maybe it's just as well. Maybe it's better that people don't know. What a great cause to be on the losing side of. Personal revolution is fueled by emotional energy of the purest intensity. That intensity comes from focus, and that kind of focused emotional energy doesn't look like love or tranquility or compassion. It looks like seething, rage, or severe psychosis. It's an ugly fact of an ugly business. But that's how it works. Suicidal discontent. That's how revolutions are won, and that's why they so seldom are. Rockets aren't launched into space on chanting and prayers, and escaping the ego's gravity requires an equivalent amount of explosive force. We have to take all the emotional energy we normally blast out in 1,000 directions to keep our dream state characters animated and focus it on a single point. It's all or nothing. This is the kind of stuff Frank and I discussed now and then. He'd spent his life quietly wondering where his beloved revolution went wrong, how the LSD-based transcendence of the species he'd watched unfolding ended up failing so miserably. I know he came to understand the whole thing better by discussing it with me, but I don't think that made him any happier about it. The way he saw it, the war was over. The good guys lost, and history is written by the winners. Standard religions and belief systems, whether orthodox or unorthodox, mainstream or wacko, serve to keep the herd together and heading slowly nowhere in an orderly manner. Whether we believe in something or believe we don't believe in anything makes no difference. All beliefs are the same belief. There is only the herd. There are always those who aren't content within the herd and seek something more than mindless plodding and grazing and humping. They peel themselves away and form subherds that travel apart, but alongside, independent in belief and appearance only. There are also the occasional stragglers and strays, but the trick to keeping loose stock with the herd, the Good Shepherd knows, is to let them stray. They won't go far. where would they go? What is commonly thought of as the herd is really just the core herd. There is a larger, more scattered herd that becomes visible as our elevation increases and our perspective broadens. Those at the outermost fringes, to the sides or far out front, are no less a part of the herd than those at the heart. They're just indulging in a bit of egoic self-gratification. Draw back far enough, and we see that everyone is plodding in the same aimless direction at the same shuffling pace, and that the idea of a radical, or a revolutionary, or a bold explorer is nothing more than a petty conceit. There are no explorers. There is no spirit of exploration. There is no courage. There is no freedom or love of freedom. There is only the herd. Every once in a while, a single beast does leave the herd. Never a group, or even a pair. Where there's more than one, there's the herd. They only go, when they go, one at a time. And where do they go? Over the edge, of course. Where else? There are only two choices, the herd and over the edge. There is only the herd. And there is no herd. I've said that when I was young, I never found anyone I would have wanted to be like. Not only didn't I know anyone, I didn't know of anyone. There was no success that looked like success to me. There was no accomplishment that seemed worth the bother. The only thing I ever remember thinking might be a good way to spend a life was as a failed poet. Kind of like the village idiot, but without the civic responsibilities. The idea of being a successful poet held no charm, but being a failure as a poet had a nice feel to it. A one-man revolution, certain to fail, but for a good cause. Anyway, as I think about it now, I think I like what Frank and Buck did, or almost did, or tried to do, or thought about doing, with their lives and with their wise, foolish, impossible dreams. They were failed poets in the way that I mean it, and if my life had gone another way, I think I would have been content to be like them.
This is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah, that mescaline. Wow. That's strange stuff.
This is a disaster.
I think it's awesome. But full disclosure, I just drank ayahuasca.
What's in that tea? Psilocybin? LSD?
It's just tea.
Let's talk about LSD. Children, LSD is bad.
I have eaten some mushrooms.
Magic mushrooms?
I am hallucinating.
Okay, so I've been Googling what the internet says about magic mushrooms. The DEA says that magic mushrooms are abused by ingesting them orally. Well, that doesn't sound so bad.
We anticipate that over the next several decades, there will be thousands of psychedelic clinics established at which therapists will be able to administer MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, and other psychedelics to potentially millions of patients. These clinics can also evolve into centers where people can come for psychedelic psychotherapy for personal growth, for couples therapy, or for spiritual mystical experiences. Humanity now is in a race between catastrophe and consciousness. The psychedelic renaissance is here to help consciousness triumph. And now, if you all just look under your seats, just joking. Thank you.